Welcome to the Wayne Bennett podcast, celebrating West Virginia's people, places, and the culture of Southern Appalachia. Now here's your host, Wayne Bennett.
Welcome to Wayne Bennett's podcast. I'm your host, Wayne Bennett, and this is episode 165. It's April the 24th, 2025. And our guest today is a Sophia High School graduate, and he also spent 27 years in the military and National Guard. And Mike Kinsley, welcome.
Good to be here.
Now, you guys are getting ready to have a reunion. Sophia High School is here soon, aren't you?
Yes, sir. July, I believe. I have to double check on that, but I believe it's July.
Now, do they have those every year? Or?
No, about every 3 years, it seems like, and it's an all-years reunion.
Well, since Sophia became independent, consolidated with Stokoe, was 76, 77, somewhere
76.
along that line. They, of course, all the graduates from Sophia High School are not getting any younger. I think probably the youngest ones now would be about 67 or something like that.
67, maybe 68.
Yeah, and so it's good that you guys have a museum at Sophia,
Yes.
the old Soak Creek School. I went up there right when they were finishing it, and and I'm sure they've added a lot of stuff to it since then. But it's been really neat, actually.
And they have two full rooms full of stuff the last time I was there, and it's just they have yearbook from every year since the beginning, and have copies of it too, and folders where you can get them out and look through them and everything. I found first year I found a couple of articles. My mom was there the first year it opened. You do a Facebook page of Sophia graduate. What's that called? You went to Sophia High School if ... It's not terribly active, but there's a lot of people that follow and stuff on it. We try and highlight things that people do and stuff. I know I've seen you post on it and stuff too, especially when there's someone from Sophia High School sort of thing. I know I enjoyed Neil Lacey's podcast, and he lived 2 houses from me.
Well, at Midway, yeah, I appreciate you letting us put some of our interviews on there. We have done a lot of people from the Sophia area over the years, and you always learn a little bit about someone that you didn't know before. And if you've listened, I used to teach over at Sophia Elementary for a little while, and people were very good to me at the elementary school. And Paul Craighead was the principal, and it brought a lot of memories. And I still see a lot of the kids that I had in school back during that time. But now your dad and mom, your dad actually was from Wyoming County, wasn't he?
Yes. He was one of 8 brothers and had 3 sisters also. During World War II, all 8 brothers were in the service at one time or another.
Wow. Did any of them get killed in World War II?
Fortunately not. One uncle hurt very bad in the South Pacific. I think he got malaria, and that was probably closest he came to death was the malaria, but he's got a Purple Heart and some stuff from where he was in the Rangers, and they did a good bit in South Pacific, as I found out.
That's amazing. Now, was your mom from Wyoming County also?
No, she's been from Sophia, Midway, pretty much all her life. Well, when she was growing up, Midway was considered part of Sophia.
Yeah.
And I think technically it might have been Midway Edition or something like that, but that's where she was born, raised all my life that I can remember in Midway.
Now, your dad and mom came from what they call the greatest generation. They lived through the Depression and the Great Depression, and then World War II, and it's kind of strange. My brother was never in the service, but he got into construction and built he was superintendent of the company that built the Korean War Memorial, and also one of the superintendents that built the Bedford, Virginia Memorial, the D-Day
National. That is a fantastic place.
Yeah. He spent 3 years down there. The company that he worked for set the big stone, and so they get all the monuments and stuff, around. But it was I've never been there, but I'm going to make it a point to go there this summer.
It is definitely worth it.
Yeah, and now you as a youngster, were you involved in any sports or anything?
I was the one at recess that was the last one picked for basketball. And I was the second tallest kid in the class. But I just never had the really good hand skills or anything like that. I couldn't touch a rim. Of course, a lot of people couldn't back then, I guess. But I really enjoyed that. The time even getting to play, it didn't matter, that part. Now, when I went to Sophia, I was able to go out for wrestling in the 11th and 12th grade.
Did you play football?
No, I went to Votech for a 3-year electronics program.
Yeah.
And it was, unlike now, unless you were from Woodrow, there were no morning classes. Everyone from all the satellite high schools was in the afternoon class. And, of course, everything except wrestling practiced during sixth period. And wrestling was low enough on the totem pole that they had to practice after school was over. So that was the only thing I could really do, other than my freshman year. And I was still trying to figure out what high school was at that time.
Now, I know that just some things that I had come across that you were involved with. I'd seen a thing where you were the president of the Hilltop Baptist Youth Fellowship, BYF I used to call that. And you went to a lot of camps, like the 4-H camp, and the School of Mines camp. That might have been a little bit later, but and then you were also the president of the county vicar, wasn't you?
I was parliamentarian.
Parliamentarian.
I did go on a couple of trips and stuff. I really enjoyed my time there. To me, between high school and Votech and those kind of clubs like Vica, that to me was just a real good time.
Yeah. Now, were you primarily interested in electronics, or?
At that time, I really was. I had this dream of going to, more on the military side, of going to UVA, which at that time at least had Naval ROTC, and I was wanting to be a submariner. Then I come to find out that 6'2", 6'3" is too tall for a submarine duty.
Now, you mentioned that you had wrestled at Sophia, and of course some of the guys that were on the team during that time, Eric Fritz is a good friend of mine.
Yes.
Eric, he's put out several books on Sophia baseball, wrestling, and just Sophia in general. And Kenny Chamberlain, I think, was around at that time. Kenny ended up being
class of 71.
Yeah, he was a real good coach later too. And but Mickey Udy was on the team during that time. Mickey wasn't real big at that time.
He was 132, if I remember.
He was he a tough guy in high school?
I thought that was his middle name. I've sat on top of the school boiler trying to sweat off a couple of pounds with him a lot of times. Mickey was just flat out tough. Like I said, we stayed friends even after he'd went in the Army, and was doing a lot of hometown boxing with the Army and stuff. And then later we were in the same National Guard unit together, and a lot of good times with Mickey. A lot of weird ones, but a lot of good ones too.
Well, he used to, when I was working at the old Y, he would train up there sometimes, and he would always come in, and Chuck Littlejohn and I had the same office together, and he would come in and talk to us after he would train, and we both thought the world of him. That's when he was in his heyday of the fighting paratrooper, is what they called him, and he was tough. And then later on, he was a bouncer down at the Timeout Club, and I I could never figure him out as a bouncer because he was too nice. I mean, he definitely had the potential. He could get you out of there, but he was just a nice guy.
And like I say, his size is a little bit deceptive too, where he was a little bit smaller, than what you imagine as a bouncer.
Yeah.
I think bouncer as to some 250 guy, 275, and doesn't have a neck or anything like that. Just head sits on the shoulders and stuff. But yeah, he certainly didn't look like a typical bouncer of any type.
But he was. We watched all of his boxing matches. They at that time, besides Golden Gloves and stuff, they would have special. John Tanner used to put on special shows around, and every time Mickey boxed, we would go. Chuck and I would go see him, and a couple of times they would put Mickey's name on the poster, and he didn't know anything about it. He'd come and say,
at least the name on the poster will draw some crowd. That's for
but
sure.
he usually ended up boxing. But
my dad was a big boxing fan. After he passed, I'm going through, all the personal stuff and things that he had like next to his chair and in the shelf and stuff. And there was several articles and stuff on Mickey Hartenstein.
Frank Hartenstein.
Yeah, and he would get a friend from next street over from us, and they would go down to Huntington and get a room for the week just to watch the boxing and stuff down there, and Charleston too, back when it was a lot of, I guess that was AAU, where they had the big tournaments in Charleston and Huntington. I'm not sure if it was AAU. Maybe it was Golden Gloves.
Yeah, the Golden Gloves was big then. AAU was just kind of coming along, and then the boxing clubs and stuff started kind of phasing out, and the Tough Man came in and kind of took their place. And there's still some boxing around, but now you got the mixed martial arts, and I get all confused on what. I mean, some of them don't use gloves, some of them do use gloves, some of them can kick, and others can't. I mean, I do know that biting is not allowed in most of them, but I was because some of those guys did train at the Y, and actually the Y had put on a couple shows, and Bob Bolin was my boss, and he was assistant deputy commissioner in boxing in West Virginia, so we followed it quite a bit, and but I always wondered about Mickey when he was in high school. I knew he was a tough guy later.
Yeah.
I just didn't know what he was like in high school.
I think he played football too. I'm not sure about all 4 years or anything, but I do seem to remember him being on the football squad. But,
No, I know one guy that you wrestled in the 11th grade from Beckley. You wrestled John Peters, and John beat you, and but John went on and coached at Harrisville High School, and actually was inducted in the National Wrestling Hall of Fame back it's been 10, 12 years now, but he was a pretty accomplished and stayed in the sport, pretty accomplished guy. I used to run into him a lot of times when we would go to Eastern Panhandle or go to Pennsylvania, and he was coaching up and around that area. And, he was from Beckley. And
that could be my claim to fame, that I lost to a Hall of Fame
there you
wrestler.
go. Well, I wanted to point that out.
To be very honest, everybody I wrestled beat me.
Uh-huh.
I never won a match. And, well, I weighed about 165, 166, somewhere in that area. And the team was I think we have 15 people on the entire squad. And Eric Fritz was at 175, and then they had me wrestling 185 simply because they didn't have anybody for that. So I'm worried about that 20. You can't be more than 20 pounds under the limit, and so I'm eating hard again, everything just to stay at 165, 167. But I really enjoy a victory for me was when I didn't get pinned.
Well, there's
but sitting there between Eric Fritz and Henry Lavender, that was one of the best times of my life. Both of them just great teammates and great wrestlers, and every time I come back off the mat, Henry tap me on the knee, and he'd go, "It's all right, Mike. I'll get this next one."
Well, there's an old saying: it's best to be in the arena and to have lost than not to have been in an arena at all. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Coach Patterson, of course, he was a good friend of mine, and anytime I'd write something in the paper, if he didn't think it was right, he'd call me up on Sunday morning. The paper would come out on Sunday, and he'd call me Sunday morning. "I don't think you got that right, Way." Then we'd argue over it. And his memory was pretty good. Actually, it was he wanted me to come over his house, and he wanted to sit down and just talk wrestling for hours. And I had planned to go, and that's when COVID hit, and I couldn't go. And he passed away before it all ended, and I never got to do that with him.
Yeah, I remember, like I say, I thought he was a great coach, and he was patient, but still yet he would work you, till you couldn't do any more and ask you for just a little bit more each time and stuff. Before him was Coach Lacey, Neil's dad, and while I was going to Midway Elementary, my dad helped. He was real good friends with Coach Lacey, and would help him go somewhere with the haul a carload of wrestlers like Greenbrier West or someplace like that. And once in a while I go with him and stuff. But I know he helped Coach Lacey with a lot of that, and with the Boy Scouts.
Yeah.
He was, in fact, I think my dad was the next scoutmaster after Coach Lacey and stuff. So that was.
I knew Neil had said his dad. How far did you get in the Scouts? I mean,
made second class. Was a patrol leader, and that was about it. We didn't really have a lot of facilities or anything like that. I think the biggest thing that kept me from making first class was we didn't really have a organized place to go take a swimming test.
Yeah,
and that was because and I could swim good because I love being around the water and stuff. Just never got the chance.
And we had, I joined the Boy Scouts, and I didn't join until I was like in the 9th grade because there wasn't nothing local. And, but then, I was in there about a year and a half, and I really enjoyed it. But then when I got in high school, I got into sports and stuff, and I didn't more seriously, and didn't really have the time for the Boy Scouts. But now we did go to Camp Wilderness over C&O Dam Road,
Right.
and a lot of the guys got their merit badges and stuff that week that we were over there, doing something. The swimming, it was a real good experience. Now, when you graduated, did you go to West Virginia Tech?
I did. Went straight down there and kind of sowed my wild oats the first semester of my grades and everything. I'd rather not say what they were, but it was a long Christmas holiday, let me tell you that. Then I settled down, and second semester, my freshman year, I pledged fraternity, got my grade point back up above 3.0. And Bob Clay was a fraternity brother.
Yeah, Bob's been on our program a couple times.
I've heard both of them, yeah.
Bob is he was a great newspaper guy, and oh man, the fishing. He's the guru, man.
Well, Tech had at that time they had a pretty big what Bob went to print management, I think, or something like that. They had a pretty big program in that.
Yeah. There was John Lucento used to get some things for me when he went down to Tech, and their printing class would when we would have programs or something, they would print our programs or tickets, or that's back before we had computers and those kind of things. But it was, I guess, the computer system kind of killed a lot of the printing business.
Changed a lot of everything.
Photography and all that stuff is kind of hurt. But Bob has got into making these fly rod fishing
Oh, yeah.
poles. And I mean, he brought a couple, I can't even imagine doing something like that. Now, after you got out of Tech, what kind of degree did you get at Tech?
I actually did not get
Oh,
one
you
at
didn't
Tech.
get one.
Second semester of my second year, I decided I wanted to be married. Current wife decided she wanted to get married and dropped out during a week after spring break and joined the Air Force. Texas, basic training. I got 10 days leave, come home, married my wife on her 18th birthday. I went back to Texas. She went back to Woodrow for another month till she graduated. And then she came down to Texas. So I did end up going, after I got out of the Air Force, went back to Beckley College, got my associates in mining tech, and then I was working for Department of Highways, and I was taking a lot of tech's night classes and stuff. They had over at Oak Hill and a couple down in Montgomery. I'd go to those, and they were like in civil engineering. Kind of made a lot of circles, I guess. Or the fancy word would be an eclectic background.
Well, I almost went into the Air Force when I graduated from high school. I actually planned on that and not go to college. And of course, that was during the Vietnam era. And I had a 12th grade English teacher, that one of my favorite teachers, and it was like April of my senior year, and everybody in my class was, talking about what school they was going to go to and all that. And I was walking out, and she said, "Where are you going to college?" And I said, "I'm not going to go. I'm going to Air Force." She said, "You need to go to college, and you need to teach English is what you need to do." And I don't know, it was just that bug, and that's what I did. And I had to borrow money and everything because I lived in a single family home. But and I don't regret it at all. But it was funny how much influence somebody could have.
I have trouble with, just talking about things older being different and also cheaper, I guess, a whole lot. For the 2 years that I went to Tech, my student loan was $1,500 per year. And it's like, I have trouble just visualizing how people have, I've got $150,000 in student loan debts, I'm like, oh,
I think I owed,
that's got to be bad.
I think I owed $7,000 when I graduated from 4 years. I owed seven, and my wife, I think when she graduated, she owed 6 or something. She got a couple scholarships, but now, I mean, I don't even know how they pay them back, and and what kind of job do you get to pay those kind of things back? But it's a different time for sure. Now, how long were you actually in the service?
Went in 73, spring of 73, and was actually in the Air Force a little over 3 years. And of course, they were drawing down in strength from Vietnam being over and stuff like that. So they were offering a couple of early outs. I got out 9 months early because we had our first child there in Austin, Texas, who's proud to be called a Texican. My wife had decided her father moved around a lot while she was in school, and she said, "I hated being a new kid in school." And so we decided to go ahead and get out and come back home and pursue it here. I went into the Air National Guard down at Charleston when I got out of the Air Force, and I was in there a little less than a year. And I transferred to the Army National Guard here in Beckley. Of course, this was all like, 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks in the summer, kind of traditional guardsman. And then in 1983, I got the chance to go active duty or full-time with the National Guard. At a typical armory, at least at that time, 2 or 3 members of the unit would be on active duty 24 hours a day, every day. And they were the ones that generally took care of the logistics and that type of thing, of making sure, food was ordered for the monthly training, whatever training devices or locations that you had to use, that, you aligned that up, got the agreements for that sort of thing, arranged for the unit members to go to schools and schedule them and everything like that, doing their payroll, that kind of thing. So I started that in '83 and quit doing that in January of 2001. I had about 27 years and change.
So you weren't involved in combat in Iraq or anything like that?
I was fortunate enough that I was never in harm's way.
Yeah.
And I'm really, the more and more people that I talk to that were, I'm glad I wasn't. I mean, it made me really glad. I actually retired 7 months before 9/11 happened. And then when my old unit that I was in, when they mobilized, I was so torn, of wanting to be with all the guys and people I'd known for, 20, 30 years, and not wanting to have my wife have to worry about me being somewhere. Of course, once I retired, I didn't really have an option unless Mother Army said, hey, you're so valuable, we're going to take you out of retirement, which they did. I mean, that's stuff they do for generals and stuff, not for sergeants. But, thought of, my wife, worry about that and stuff. My youngest son was in the first unit of the West Virginia Army Guard that mobilized for after 9/11. And he was one semester away from graduating Bluefield State and got activated. Now, he just deployed within the state at that time. And then later on, I guess it was about '09, he deployed with my old unit. So I stayed in touch, through those two things especially, really stayed in touch with a lot of people that I knew.
Yeah, you mentioned 9/11. The April of that year, my wife and I went on a bus tour to New York City, and we were there. We got to see all everything you wanted to see, and we had free time to walk around New York and everything a few days, and I never felt safer in a big city. I mean, there was police every corner and some on horses, and I never really felt threatened, and to see the Twin Towers. I mean, I actually have a picture of me and the Twin Towers at a distance of that April, and then see that happened in September. It was just a shock for everybody. I mean, it was, and the lives that were lost. It just makes it even more unbelievable. But I don't guess I knew your youngest. I knew David, your son.
Yeah, he's my youngest.
He's your youngest.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know your oldest son. I don't guess.
Probably not. He went to Sophia Junior High, and I think he transferred to Park last semester of junior high before he went to Woodrow. And he didn't, being so late going in, he didn't get involved with any kind of sports or anything. He played football for Tom Poe at Sophia Junior.
Now David played football and wrestled for me. Mm-hmm. Now I think I quit his 9th grade year maybe. I'm not sure. I kind of get those.
I think.
Charlie Bowling was.
I think he was the coach on the 9th grade.
Yeah, but I can remember that when he was in 8th grade, and we had I had kids like Adam Wilson and some of those guys, and that was the hardest working bunch of kids I can remember, and we are in football. Always our toughest opponent was usually Bluefield, and we were playing Bluefield at home. This is when David was in the 8th grade, and they had a tremendous team, and so we prepared well. We practiced on Saturday before the game, and then Monday, and I had a film on Bluefield that the old coach from Woodrow, who was at Blacksburg, Joel Hicks, he gave me a couple films, and we had all their plays broken down. Our guys were fired up because we knew this was going to be the game of the season, and so they came to our place, And it was a knockdown, drag-out game. I mean, it was just bam, 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 bam. And they ended up beating us. But I went in and talked to the kids, and it was of course, you're disappointed that you lose, but I couldn't have been more prouder of a bunch of kids because they left it all out there on the field. It just came down to the point that Bluefield had more athletes than we had, yeah. And they beat us, but it was a very close game, and we never lost another game. Bluefield never lost one that season at all, and so it was. And then when I coached him in wrestling, you were giving an example that you were filling in, and for when you were at Sophia, you were lighter in weight, and David kind of did the same thing. He was wrestling heavyweight. Yeah. He wasn't a heavyweight.
If I understood correct, him and Dino Zafratis, that they could both weigh 175 before Unlimited.
I don't think it was Dino.
Was it?
No, Dino was a little lower. I think it was Adam Wilson. I'm pretty sure it was Adam Wilson.
But he said every week they would have to wrestle off each other to see who had to do heavyweight and who had to do the other. And
but he had success at Unlimited. Actually, he won a lot of matches.
There was one match I didn't get to go to. Thinking maybe it was Summersville or somewhere up that way. And my wife went to it and she said, David lost, but she said, I don't see how anybody could get their arms around that kid. There's no way he was under 250. But he went to down at Huntington. I think y'all had him seated 8th, and that's what he finished.
So, that's great. That down there. Yeah. And now did he play ball in high school?
He went out for football. He wrestled. I think he went out for wrestling, and he went out for football also. And during his 10th grade, he messed up his leg or something, was on crutches the rest of the season, and he just didn't stick with that.
Yeah. Now, you had actually coached soccer earlier, and who was Joe Maynard? Was he?
Joe Maynard. Uh-huh.
And you guys won the Governor's Cup one year, didn't you?
We did. In fact, that was my older son was on the team. The year before, we were under 14s, and the first year that we went, we stopped at the semifinal game was our last game. And then the next year, I had all but 2 of my players still playing. I lost 2 to age, moved up in age group, and they won the state championship with, I had 12 players, and you've got to field 11 to play. And that was, I think, that was big. I was so proud of those kids. It was such a big accomplishment, for just a 12-person squad. And of course, the Governor's Cup, they're not the travel team or anything. They're just the local, playing the local league and stuff. So going down to St. Albans and playing stuff is unbelievable. In that same core group, I didn't coach them next year. I think I was an assistant coach, and they finished. They finished in the semifinals. First year, we actually lost in the championship, a real killer and stuff. But really enjoyed it. It was typical of those, my kids playing, I'll coach, kind of parent sort of thing. I didn't know anything about soccer when I first started. Though I believe it was Jeff Graham called me up and said, hey, would you mind being a soccer coach? And I said, I don't even know any rules about it or anything. And he said, that's okay. The Y had expanded from 3 teams, 8 teams between from one season to the next. And he said, that's all right. I've got an assistant coach for you, and I swear I cannot remember his name, but he played at Woodrow. And he said, he'll be your assistant coach. He knows, everything about it. I just need an adult in charge. So that was my first year of coaching, was an adult as an adult in charge. And then I got back into it, and then coached some with Randy O'Neill when my younger son, when David went through. And sort of thing. Had a pretty good time with both of them. I got into refereeing and stuff also. And
Now, you coached football some with Greg Shoemate.
1 year.
1 year.
Actually, it was, let's see, David was on the A team first year, and Greg was a coach. I think Greg's kids moved on up, and Greg moved up too. So I was the coach of the A team 1 year.
Yeah.
And again, I know football from watching it and that sort of thing, but I didn't really know any of the real stuff. And I came to you when you were coaching. You were coaching at Park, and I guess David would have been in sixth grade then. And I come to you asking you for some basic formations and simple plays, because it was with Southwest Bandits, and a majority of those kids fell into the Park Juniors feeder system. And I didn't have any ego as a coach, like, oh, I'm going to make this special play and he'll run behind this guy and so like that. And I just wanted, my thought as a coach always was help the kids develop. It's not I'm the coach, I'm the dad, and they're doing something I didn't do when I was a kid, and I'm going to live through that. I tried my best not to be that kind of thing. So I come to you for some basic formations and basic plays that I knew if they stuck with football, that's what they were going to run into. Basically, what your system, if you will, it helped. I mean, I didn't have to sit there and make up
from Southwest
stuff. Yeah.
And it definitely helped our program. And I couldn't coach football now the way they run, even in the middle school. They run everything out of the shotgun, a lot more passing, those kind of things. I was more just basic and a little dust here and there, and we won. Won a lot of games, but had success. But the games changed a lot, and but something that I was able to do, and it depends on what your personnel was. I mean, you got. And that's what I think some of these high school coaches make mistakes at now. They try to, you come in, we're going to play this. Well, if you don't have the personnel to do it, I mean, you can't have a passing team if you don't have a quarterback or somebody who can catch, so you got to do whatever. And, but some coaches try to do it anyway, but most of the high school jobs now are just full-time jobs. I mean, those guys work all year round. They lift. It's just it's a full-time job. But I coached wrestling for 25 years. And I coached football for 14, and I still hear from a lot of the kids, on Facebook and stuff now that I coached, and I don't think I made too many of them mad. There's probably still a couple of them that won't talk to me, but even a couple that I thought should be mad at me has got in touch with me.
You were talking about Joe Maynard, coaching with him. We made a pretty good pair because he knew soccer, and more than I'll ever know about soccer, and the nuances and things like that. I knew authority from military background, so I would be more in charge of their training and physical training, kind of things like that. During practice, if they were actually scrimmaging and one of them would, a penalty or something on one of them, I would call that penalty. I said, after practice. And so everybody that got a penalty or anything, offside, anything like that, during the scrimmage, got a lap. And that was out of Dry Hill, where they had the 3 fields out there. And a lap was around all 3 fields. And I would lead them on that lap, however many there were. Jay Riss was one of my, I love him as a player and stuff. I haven't seen him for quite a while, but he was a good player, good to coach. He really was. And but that was my idea of coaching was in that at that time was I'll worry about making them physically fit as best I can, and giving them some mental discipline. And like I said, Joe would he would work on the technical part of it, and it really seemed to work out pretty good.
Now, did you when you went into the military? Let's go back a second. Did you feel pressure to go in because your dad and the uncles and all them had?
No pressure at all. It was just always something I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And before I even knew about all the brothers being in the military and stuff like that, all three of my mom's brothers were in the Marines during World War II.
Now you had. I remember seeing something in the paper that you were active at the American Legion, I think, and you were teaching a group of kids on the proper way to dispose of a flag.
Right.
And then I saw another time that one of your dogs, Rain Dog or something, he was in a parade somewhere.
Yeah, it was a Beckley Christmas parade, and we were just, watching the parade, but my wife it was our first boxer dog, and she loved to dress him up, and he would hold still and wear the costumes and stuff. In the early 90s, I worked as a recruiter for the National Guard out of the Brush Fork Armory, and one of the festivals that they had in Princeton each year, my wife would make a little uniform for him, take one of, my old pants and stuff, and she would make a uniform for him, and they had like a pet look-alike contest. And I managed to come in second on that a couple of times. There was a gentleman that had a bulldog, and he was, short and stocky and had this big white beard, and he looked like a bulldog. I think it was him looking like the dog rather than the dog looking like him. But one year she made a uniform out of camouflage, of an old camouflage uniform, and I wore my camouflage. And then the next year she made one out of my dress uniform. I wore a dress uniform for that one. it was pretty popular and liked it. But yeah, I think I remember there was a picture in the paper. I think somebody had taken.
Another thing, I can remember reading an obituary, and a person had died, and they left their dog, and you adopted their dog.
That would have been about 4 or 5 years ago, maybe.
Maybe it was. Okay.
A cousin of mine.
Because I said I know him.
Yeah.
And,
cousin of mine, she'd had a fall and brain injury and stuff, and she had a boxer. They were looking for someone to take care of the boxer, adopt the boxer. And I said, I'll foster it. If you get better, then, he's still yours. But she didn't make it, and we kept, it was her, and we kept her until she passed. So,
now, what kind of jobs did you work in when you come around here? You worked at the VA hospital for a while.
That was where I really, really retired.
Okay.
When I first come back from Texas, I worked at National Mine Service for a few months. Then I took the underground miner certification. I worked for Westmoreland Coal about 3 years in the McAlpin. Then went with Department of Highways, and I was with them about 3 or 4 years. I guess 70 or 80 to 83 maybe, or 79 to 83. And then I went full-time with the National Guard in fall of 83.
Okay.
And when I retired in 01, I started with Social Security on January of that year. Worked for them 10 years, then transferred to the VA hospital. And with exactly 10 years in is when I transferred. Worked there for 4 years, a little over 4 years, and then fully retired. And the timing was, I really didn't want to retire right then, but I was having some physical problems. And my dad was really having a lot of mobility problems and stuff. And I got to spend like a year and a half. My primary thing was, going to helping take care of Dad. He was pretty independent as far as that goes, but his vision was about gone and his hearing was about gone. But, taking him here, he had a real good neighbor that really took care of him prior to that. He passed away. And then I sort of was able to retire and do that, and got to talk to him a lot more than I ever had. Him tell me stories that I never heard and stuff like that. And it was really neat. I really enjoyed that. And, looking back, the timing on getting to spend time with my dad, that was really good.
It was kind of similar to what I retired from the Board of Education. Still was quite young, and I went into my family was a family of builders. My dad, my brother, my nephew, all them. And so I wanted to do some of that work before I got too old to do it. And so as soon as I retired, I went into remodeling and construction with a nephew of mine who was very well adept at building. And we worked together about 3 years, and he was more like a brother than he was a nephew. And we did well. I mean, it got to a point that I quit because we were working 6 days a week, and I was over 60 at that time. And I said, I don't want to do it that much. But it wasn't. It was only a short time after that he got ill. He got cancer and went really quick. And those 3 years that we were together, it was, I'm really glad we did that, because we got to spend a lot of time. And we were perfect partners. We had both kind of thought alike. And he had never had anybody to work for him that would show up on time with a truck and had their own tools and had little knowledge. Most of the time he had to go get them. And
even to this day, I'll hire a handyman to build a deck or cut some trees and stuff like that. And they tell me, they have so much trouble keeping regular help and help that they can depend on, that'll be there every day.
You can't find anybody. And that's one of the problems with West Virginia, the business side. They don't have the workforce, to handle new businesses. And I don't know what they're going to do, but what do you think? And I don't want to put you on the line here, but with the new presidential administration and the VA and how the veterans have been treated, I mean, what do you see coming up? I know some people are very concerned, some people not so much, but
I'm sure that particularly with the veterans part of it, there will be certain things that are reduced, but still yet as somebody who's received a check from the U.S. government since March of 1973 to this day, I can't complain a lot about the government spending. But I also have seen a whole lot of areas, as everyone I'm sure thinks they do, that could be trimmed down, made a lot more efficient. So in that part, I'm pretty supportive of it. At the same time, yes, it's going to be some cuts here and there, but life is not nobody gets everything all the time in life either. And I don't mean that in a cruel way by any means. And I try and stay pretty apolitical, if you will. I don't talk about anything like that on social media.
Well, I don't either. I don't.
There's no use. Really.
There's only two things
how many people's minds have been changed by you posting something on Facebook that they didn't originally agree with? Nobody.
I try to stay away from arguing religion or politics. I don't, if somebody wants to, and I do try, especially before the last election, I just stayed off of it. I just couldn't, off the social media. It was just killing me, I mean, both sides, and some people, childish how some people would get, but it was, but I do, I mean, I hope that I agree with you. I think it's education. There's plenty of places you can trim money, and I hope they do the smart thing and it works out. You got an award from A. James Mansion one time, did you?
You've done some homework. You have done
What
some
did you
homework.
get?
During, I guess, 86 to 88 time frame, I was working at the Beckley Armory, and I got hooked up with Jim Martin at WWNR, and I come in every morning a little bit before 6, and our news service consisted of, we had a subscription to the Raleigh Register. And so I would go through and pick out about 5 or 6 news stories and, circle them. And every half hour I would read the news, just sort of mixing up and jumbling the stories. And I would do that and then go to work at the Armory. And Jim, a lot of times when they were doing promotions or something like that, Jim would invite me along. We came to Park for lunch one day, just because a couple of radio people, or Jim being a radio person and me being a sidekick, if you will. And that was one of those things. I think it was down at the where the Hex used to be, where Ollie's is now. And A. James was down there. I don't really remember the thing, but we got a hat and a certificate. And I was talking with
a real hat.
Yeah, because he had those, I guess, fedora type style that he always wore. And I was talking with Jim the other day and could not figure out whatever happened to the hat. I was going through my files and stuff, and I found the certificate. But
well, I got, AJ's Mansion was a wrestling guy. He wrestled at WVU. They called him the Bear, and he was a character. And he wasn't bad. And he coached wrestling over here at Smoot High School in Fayette County. He started a program over there. And so when we started the Raleigh County Wrestling Hall of Fame, and we raised some money, and we had a dinner at the Ramada Inn, which was up on Harper Road at that time. And he was the Secretary of State. I didn't really think it would happen, but I sent him a note, and I said, you're a wrestling guy. This is Hall of Fame. Why don't you come up and talk? And a couple of days later, his secretary calls and said, Mr. Manchin's going to be there. Well, it was about still a week away. And so we publicized it. And we had a heck of a crowd. And he was an eloquent speaker. I mean, you had to love the guy. Poor finance person, but he was a great speaker. And that was probably the best one we ever had. We had several dinners, but anyway, it was about a week later. He sent me a letter and certificate, making me the ambassador of West Virginia for what. But it was and then he sent me a real nice plaque, and it had the seal of West Virginia, and bronze. And I thought, what am I going to do with this thing? I don't know, and so I kept it for years and years, and it just collected dust. We move it every time we moved the furniture around, and after, 40 years, maybe 30 years, 35 years, 40 years, I gave it to another guy, and I said, I don't care what you do with it, but we don't need it anymore. And said, but I still have the letter and the certificate.
He was quite the flamboyant guy, wasn't he?
He spent a lot of West Virginia's money.
I don't think there was a camera or a microphone that he was afraid of or didn't like. And like I say, probably the biggest budget item in his office was plaques and certificates.
Oh, I would vote for him today if he ran. But to cap the story, we had that dinner in a big part of the Ramada Inn, and as we were leaving, he had his helpers with him. He had 3 or 4 guys, and they were going. And over in another section of the Ramada Inn, a smaller room, the local medical association was having a meeting, and they had their wives and everything, and they probably had 50 people or something like that. We had about 200 or 300, but he said, he asked me, he said, what is that? And I said, well, that's the local medical association. They're having a meeting. He walked right in, and in 5 minutes he was talking to the group, and that's just that's what a great guy he was. But What about my buddy Billy Payne? You follow Billy Payne?
I do. My wife takes belly dancing classes with his girl, with his wife, and that's how we got to know him. I love going to the different places and watching him. Like I say, Billy's really got a kind of a weird type thing to me as a musician and stuff. Not promoted that much, or never got the chance to be promoted on a local or conventional thing. Lord, he's extremely popular overseas in Europe and stuff, and in a smaller circle, I guess, in the United States is the impression I've got. But just the so-called big success that people usually think of, and as far as I know, Billy's happy and everything with what he is and stuff, and he's still active and still putting out some albums every little bit.
Yeah, I've got. I listen to his CDs quite a bit. He was. My father-in-law was a country musician and played local for 70 years. And I actually was 91 years old and was still playing in a country band. And Billy used to come over his house and they would practice some of several other local positions. That's how we got to know him. And he was a real good family friend. And we don't go out a lot at night, but we've seen him a few times at Fridays in the park and a couple of other things that he's put on. But I like that. I like the older style of classic music, country music, and of course Waylon Jennings. He definitely a Waylon Jennings guy.
Yeah.
He's very talented. But Billy's a good guy. Now you describe yourself as a man of leisure. What do you do during these days now?
Ooh, that's a tough question. It'd be a lot easier to ask me what my wife wants me to do. It'd be much longer list. Not really a lot. I kind of fiddle around the house some. I love to motorcycle ride. As I get older, the longer trips turn a little shorter than they used to be. But that's probably my biggest hobby, if you will, is bike riding.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure you're better well-traveled than I am, but my wife and I this year have decided that we're going to spend a lot of our trips on 1 day and 2 day trips in West Virginia, places we haven't been.
Right.
And even when I was coaching, a lot of times we would go to Wheeling, but we'd go to the gym and wrestle all day and get on the bus and drive back home. And I never saw Wheeling, but technically I was there, but I didn't really get to see the state. So we're going to spend a little more time looking at West Virginia is one of the top tourist states in the country, and we've lived here for 75 years and haven't seen everything.
I think that's a common thing with a lot of people in a lot of places.
Yeah.
I saw someone maybe last week on TV, was listening to a radio show, and they were from New York, from the city, and still they'd never been to the Statue of Liberty or Empire State Building. Did what we call, I guess, would be a tourist thing.
Yeah.
And they'd never done that and lived there all their life.
Well, how many people from around our area have gone down the New River on a raft or whatever? And, and there's people that spends tens of thousands of dollars that come and spend a week in the New River Gorge, and we just drive over it. But and they're the same way. Like I said, in the beach, I know guys that lived at the beach, and they might go once a month or whatever. And most of the time, their complaint, well, there's too much traffic, it's too crowded. And I notice West Virginia now, people are starting to say, man, you can't go to Dolly Sodge or whatever. You can't park. You can't go, So I guess that's the nature of the beast. But
like Yogi Berra said, nobody goes there. It's too crowded.
Yeah, Yogi Berra. Well, listen, Mike, I appreciate you coming and talking to us. And anything else you want to bring up? But
probably I'll think of it on the way home.
Well, you're welcome back. Welcome to come back anytime you want. And I've enjoyed
that.
And tell your son Dave that Coach Bennett asked about him, and I'm I'm glad to hear he's been doing well. And anybody else out there that would like to be on our program, you can contact me at awbennett50@gmail.com, and we'll get you on here. And remember, till next time, if you're not dead yet, you're not done yet. And this is Wayne Bennett, and God bless you.